Oral questions. I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think yesterday may have been groundbreaking. We have a unanimous agreement that education is one of the key issues in this province, and we all believe we need to face it head on. The recent education assessment results have created a groundswell of concern from our citizens regarding our education system. I've described the system as broken, and I sincerely believe this to be the case. We cannot let these results continue, and it will not be fixed by simply throwing dollars at the problem. We've all done that, but that's not working. We need an understanding of what caused these poor results. Can the Premier tell the House if an analysis of these results is being done, and if so, when can we expect the results of such an analysis?
The Honourable the Premier.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais commencer en félicitant le nouveau chef de l'opposition pour sa victoire avec son parti pour devenir leur chef. Je veux aussi prendre un moment pour remercier le député de Riverview pour avoir comblé le poste de chef de l'opposition pour les deux dernières années. Monsieur le Président, c'est le fun de voir tous les députés de l'Outback qui se sont présentés pour la chefferie se lever debout pour dire qu'ils sont maintenant derrière leur chef de l'opposition. Et bien sûr, nous avons bien hâte de travailler avec tous les députés dans la salle pour avancer les priorités des gens du Nouveau-Brunswick. L'éducation, Monsieur le Président, est primordiale pour l'avenir de notre province. C'est primordial pour notre économie et aussi pour notre tissu social. C'est en raison de ça que lors du discours du trône, nous avons mis très clair que notre gouvernement va prioriser l'éducation pour améliorer les résultats, donnant à nos enfants le meilleur système possible ici au Nouveau-Brunswick.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier has spoken about the importance of stability in the New Brunswick education system. In fact, the 10-year education plan document identified stability as a key concern. From page 4, lifelong learning is fundamental to the citizens of New Brunswick, and that there is a need for a clear vision and greater stability within the system. Given the acknowledgement of stability and given the catastrophic assessment results, why would any changes be made without the full understanding of the last changes in the French immersion program, of the current situation in mathematics, sciences? Will the Premier reconsider this rush to return early French immersion to grade 1 in our Anglophone school system in the fall of 2017? Will the Premier consider this? In the name of stability in the system, let's understand where we are before we move to another place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, a few things. First off, I don't think it's prudent to call our system broken. We have teachers and educators that are working very hard, Mr. Speaker, to offer the best education possible to our youth. Are we getting the results that we all want, Mr. Speaker? No. So we have to work together to improve that. And with the education plan that we put forward, that's exactly what we're doing. Mr. Speaker, our plan is going to ensure that there's flexibility for different districts, for different schools, and even different classrooms to try out different things to be able to get the results that we need, Mr. Speaker. Offering this flexibility to our educators, to the leaders that are trying to make this happen on the front lines is the best thing that we can do for our education system, Mr. Speaker. And we are committed to giving them the support that they need by investing more in education. But it's important to note that these investments will be strategic in the ways that we think will best give us the outcomes that we need in our education system here in the province.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I've been contacted by many retired teachers who want to help. They are very passionate about their ideas to fix what they call a broken system. When I ask them why our current teachers are not speaking out, I'm told it is due to the fear that it could be considered as insubordination or grounds for dismissal. Mr. Speaker, that's sad. That's sad that the key people in the heart of our education system feel that they are not able to voice their opinion. We need their voice. Mr. Speaker, these are the people who are with our children every day and possess the intimate knowledge of the day-to-day classroom. In short, we cannot fix what is broken without their help. Will the Premier commit to joining me in creating a mechanism for these educators to share their knowledge with us, unfettered by the fear of losing their job? Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we have consulted extensively people around the province on how to develop our education plans. And to the point of the Leader of the Opposition, we have given more flexibility to the teachers and educators in our province than ever before, Mr. Speaker. We believe in them. We know they have the answers and solutions to the challenges that our education systems face, Mr. Speaker. Now, when it comes to French immersion, I think it's very unfortunate to have the Leader of the Opposition try to use French immersion as a scapegoat, Mr. Speaker. French immersion over the last few years has been in grade 3. So during that time, Mr. Speaker, we have not been getting the results that we would like in many other fields. So to use French immersion and it going back to grade 1 as the reason for the challenges in the education system in the province, Mr. Speaker, I think does not stand up on facts and I think is very unfortunate. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we committed during our platform and during the campaign to restore French immersion to grade 1 because studies show it's the best way to pick up a second language, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's not about language. It's about results in all sectors. We've seen math and sciences. 80% failure rate or 80% below the target. We're asking for stability, which is what the Premier committed to. Stability in the classroom allows you to move forward in the direction that teachers want you to move forward in. NBTA President Guy Arsenault and the Education Minister were both quoted in a recent CBC story indicating one contributing factor to the catastrophic education assessment results is classroom composition. Mr. Arsenault provided an overview of a high school English class with 28 students and their varying challenges. It was an eye-opener and helped me understand the issue. What we do not have, and I feel is critical, is an overview of what our educators feel would be a workable and a productive classroom composition. Would the Premier agree that identifying such a classroom composition will be essential to fixing our broken system?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would urge the Leader of the Opposition to stop calling our education system broken. There are challenges, Mr. Speaker, but there are lots of good things happening as well. So we need to work with our educators, our teachers, and our community leaders to improve the system, not demoralize them by saying that they have a broken system. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like the Leader of the Opposition to answer the question that I put forward. If he's saying that French immersion is the problem, Mr. Speaker, why is it that since the last 5, 6, 7 years that French immersion has found itself in grade 3, that the outcomes have not improved, Mr. Speaker? Would he answer that? And if he doesn't have an answer, then please explain to the people of New Brunswick why he would come on the floor of the legislature and use French immersion as the scapegoat to all of our problems in the education system.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. I think if the Premier had been talking to the educators, he'd realize we need another year and 3 years to assess the results of the 3-year program. To assess whether the grade 3 levels are actually working. So that's why you have stability, so you know how it's working before you change it. The Government House Leader was quoted in the media stating that education will be the #1 focus of the government this session. And I expect he speaks for the Premier, and yesterday would be an example of that is true. But let's see the results. I'm glad to hear that as the opposition intends to make it our focus as well. Fixing our problem, fixing our broken system will be a daunting task, often frustrating, often controversial, but ultimately, if we do this right, rewarding our children with the education they need to be completely global. They will be able to move around because they're getting the best education in the world, but we want them to stay here. In the spirit of cooperation and with a true sense of urgency, will the Premier agree to getting together and establishing criteria of what a graduating New Brunswick student should look like so we can let our educators...
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, je pense que le chef de l'opposition était peut-être un peu trop concentré sur sa chefferie. Il n'a pas remarqué qu'on a fait une consultation exhaustive autour de la province concernant nos plans d'éducation. Monsieur le Président, non, nous ne sommes pas intéressés à recommencer le processus pour donner la flexibilité et l'appui financier en plus à nos enseignants, nos enseignantes et les éducateurs et éducatrices autour de la province, Monsieur le Président. Nous avons un plan qui a été développé de façon non partisane, qui a été développé par des experts qui ont été développés par les Néo-Brunswickoises et Néo-Brunswickois. Alors non, nous n'allons pas entamer un autre processus pour recommencer avec un nouveau plan, Monsieur le Président. Nous avons 2 plans qui sont très solides, qui vont donner la flexibilité aux éducateurs et éducatrices tout autour de la province pour offrir le meilleur système d'éducation possible à tous nos jeunes dans toutes les régions de notre belle province, Monsieur le Président.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is the irony of it all. We have a 10-year plan that is sounded loud and clear everywhere. It has goals that are hard to find. It has targets that are hard to see. It has timelines that aren't concrete. But guess what? It has no mention of moving the French immersion program from 3 to 1. A 10-year plan, and one of the biggest moves in education, according to the educators in the classroom, and this plan has no mention. So if we're consulting with educators, why would a plan have missed this very important item if it wasn't for anything more than a political statement made during a political campaign to get political results?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there was a report done by two past education ministers, one from a Liberal government, one from a Conservative government, that looked at French immersion specifically, talking to parents, talking to educators, talking to experts. And Mr. Speaker, they found that the best time to do French immersion was in grade 1. So for the Leader of the Opposition to get up and say that our promise to give children across the province the opportunity to learn a second language is political is very unfortunate. It was based on a report done that was by experts, by exhaustive consultation, and by parents chiming in on what they wanted to see when it came to French immersion, Mr. Speaker. So we get it. He wants to blame French immersion for all the challenges that our education system faces, Mr. Speaker. But we know that it's not the case. We know that there are educators, teachers, community leaders working so hard to offer the best education possible, and we're going to give them the flexibility to get it done and give them the financial support as well, Mr. Speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. On est d'accord, ce côté-ci de la Chambre, que l'éducation est extrêmement importante et fait partie du développement pour notre avenir. Le gouvernement actuel, lors de sa campagne électorale, avait promis de grandes choses au niveau de l'aide pour les garderies, Monsieur le Président. On avait promis 6 000 nouvelles places pour les enfants dans les garderies. On avait aussi près de 60 millions, mais quand tout est estimé, c'est près de 120 millions d'investissements dans les garderies. Ça, c'est la promesse du gouvernement libéral. Alors, j'aimerais peut-être donner l'opportunité au ministre de devant cette Chambre aujourd'hui nous indiquer combien à date a-t-il investi dans les garderies et combien de places actuellement ont été créées dans nos garderies à travers la province.
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, j'espère que la députée de l'opposition a écouté hier. Nous avons mis très clair lors du discours du trône que l'éducation, incluant plus d'investissements pour que les garderies soient abordables et accessibles, était une priorité pour notre gouvernement. Alors, Monsieur le Président, comme vous pouvez voir, nous sommes très engagés pour assurer que notre système de garderie, nos systèmes d'éducation vont être de haute qualité, pour assurer que nos enfants auront les opportunités qu'ils méritent et qu'ils ont besoin. Alors, Monsieur le Président, je peux vous dire, lors de cette session, il va y avoir des belles choses qui vont se passer du niveau des garderies et nous allons continuer de faire les investissements de façon stratégique. I do want to add, Mr. Speaker, that the New Brunswick Teachers Association president said on CBC this week that one of the reasons there are challenges in the education system right now is because of the Leader of the Opposition, when he was in finance, kept cutting into education, and that we're feeling those cuts now, today, in our systems, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Mr. Madawaska-Sampson.
Ma question était très, très précise de savoir actuellement combien, à date, le gouvernement a investi dans notre système de garderie, combien de places, on avait promis 6 000, combien de places actuellement ont été créées dans nos garderies. On sait, à date, Monsieur le Président, on n'a pas entendu beaucoup de choses, on a vu le discours du trône, le reste à suivre. Ma question, on part de où? Combien d'investissements ont été faits, à date, et combien de places ont-ils été créées?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Merci, Mr. President. It's nice to be here today in the opening of the legislature as the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development. I really take this job very seriously. I've had a chance to tour the province to be able to meet with daycare operators, meet with the educators in the province, and to the members opposite, we've promised to put in 6,000 spaces by the year 2020. Right now we're up to over 2,000. But Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we are going to be investing the amount of dollars and resources put in the right place to be able to make make sure that our daycare spaces are more affordable for New Brunswickers, for parents, and to be able to make sure that we have the proper curriculum in place to be able to help in literacy. Mr. Speaker, to work with the Premier, as yesterday we focused on education here in the province, and that's what we are doing. We've done many consultations, we've listened to New Brunswickers, and we're moving a platform forward that's going to be the best for all New Brunswickers to be able to improve in literacy and math, and to be able to help parents be able to go through and do the right thing for New Brunswick. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Minister Madawaska Centre.
Monsieur le Président, le point ce matin, c'est que vous aviez fait une promesse électorale qui la valeur de tout ça a été estimée à peu près de 120 millions. On parle ici aussi également de la création de 6 000 espaces étendus à la mi-mandat. Jusqu'à date, ça a été des miettes. Je n'ai pas entendu encore le montant qui a été investi à date. Je n'ai pas lu le résultat. Mais néanmoins, c'est des miettes qui ont été investies. Les gens dans la province se disent, probablement, ils n'atteindront pas leur promesse électorale. Est-ce que le ministre peut certainement nous confirmer ceci, qu'effectivement, les promesses étaient tellement grandes qu'ils n'arriveront pas avec la totalité de l'engagement?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, first off, I think it's important that the member opposite recognize what happened during the campaign. We had a platform and we made promises, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to keep those promises, and we've been doing a good job of getting those done so far, Mr. Speaker. But there was also a costing mechanism that the Leader of the Opposition wanted us to do, so we estimated costs, Mr. Speaker. Those were not parts of the promises. Those were a mechanism based on legislation presented by the then Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we had promised, if the member opposite would have read our platform, 6,000 new spaces in our daycares by 2020. We are over 2,000 created since our mandate, Mr. Speaker, putting us well on track and actually exceeding our targets to create the 6,000 new daycare spaces for parents to be able to have the accessibility they deserve and need across the province. And we are very certain by 2020 we'll hit our 6,000 mark, and we hope that we'll exceed it, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Hampton.
Mr. Speaker, as the citizens in New Brunswick digested the education assessment results, they're coming forward with a lot of questions about these assessments, and they're expecting clear answers from their government. As opposition critic for education, I've been receiving plenty of phone calls, emails, and messages regarding concern and offers of assistance. People are looking for more information, and they're looking to help. I think the starting point is a clear understanding of the assessment results. I would like to ask the Education Minister if he can provide clear and accessible examples of what constitutes successful versus unsuccessful achievements by our students on these provincial assessments.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, we're at a point in time right now where we're going through a very extensive process and be able to deliver the best education program for all New Brunswickers here. And on these assessments, let's realize that this is a point in time where these assessments have come in place to be able to better align ourselves nationally. We have raised the bar here in New Brunswick. So this is at a point in time. What we hear right now today is that, it's all doom and gloom, but I got to say, like the Premier just mentioned, we're doing some really great things here in New Brunswick, and as the member opposite knows, we had a chance to be able to speak about the education plan. So we are moving forward. We're putting the proper resources in place to be able to improve on this. This is a point in time where we know we have to do better. So we're putting the proper resources in place to be able to have the best education system in New Brunswick, to be able to have the flexibility to allow the teachers to do the right job. We've had a chance to be able to meet teachers throughout the province, principals, district education councils. They all want to get involved, and they like what they see. We've got to move forward, and that's what we're going to do as a government.
Member for Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm certainly not here to talk about doom and gloom. We're here to look for answers and how we're going to move ahead in the best interest of the students. I do know the government wants to help concerned New Brunswickers understand the education assessment results, because it's not clear. What has gone wrong, what is going wrong, and also what is working right. What's working right in the system? You need to know that. As an education critic and a history in the system, I know that when you ask the right question, it helps in getting the right answer. So I'll do my best with the right questions. I think it will help everybody understand where the bar has been set, how high it's been set, and where we go from here. There must have been some expectations when this was done. There would have been criteria and expectations for student success to be developed. Can the Minister provide a clear outline of criteria for student success on provincial assessments?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, if the member opposite doesn't want to talk about doom and gloom, he should talk to the Leader of the Opposition to stop calling our education systems broken, Mr. Speaker. We have, as a government, committed to investing more in education than any other government, Mr. Speaker. We have done so because we believe education is crucial to our economy and social fabric. But yes, Mr. Speaker, you can be guaranteed that our investments will be strategic. They will be working, our investments will be working with the people on the front lines to ensure that they have the support that they need. So I'd like to ask the member opposite, who was in the education system, what he thinks of the New Brunswick Teachers Association president saying this week that one of the main reasons there are challenges today is because of the Leader of the Opposition when he was the finance minister's cuts to education from 2010 to 2014.
Member for Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't mention the 301 positions cut last year by EAs and teachers at this time. Provincial assessment results show grade 6 students are in particular trouble. Everyone read it last week. They saw the news, especially in math and science, with 80% below targeted levels. Something's going wrong here. When the education minister was on CBC radio, he mentioned that parents who can afford can hire one of the learning companies for tutoring help. As we know, and as the throne speech mentioned, so many families in New Brunswick are getting along paycheck to paycheck. So paying private is not an option. Can the minister tell us in the system what measures are being taken when students are struggling to meet expectations? Are those expectations clearly defined and stated anywhere?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been working with our educators in the province, and we have to realize too that these assessments were developed by the education system and the teachers here in the province. I've had the chance to be able to meet with the NBTA, LAFNB, to be able to discuss these issues one-on-one. But what we're doing here right now is we're investing over $19 million this year to be able to address some of these issues. We've got to find a better way, and I do agree that we all have to work together on this here. It's very important. As a plan for literacy, we are going to be putting the resources in place to build the work, and we're going to be looking at raising those standards with the assessments. We will be able to find ways that will improve on this with our new education plan, working with our educators here in the province, and we've been working with all stakeholders. So it's not just one issue that's going to make a change here. It's about all of us working together. So, Mr. Speaker, we're hiring 130 teachers, literacy and math leads, etc. We're putting additional resources and materials and professional development. We are putting resources where they need to be put.
Time, Minister. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over the break since July, your Select Committee on Climate Change has been hard at work, and I want to just say that it was a tremendous experience in terms of cooperation and collaboration among all three parties who sit in this legislature. All the members were fully engaged. We heard from over 150 people in the public hearings we held around the province, Mr. Speaker, and it's that kind of cooperation, Mr. Speaker, that kind of collaboration that somehow needs to extend into this chamber. Mr. Speaker, we reached unanimity on 84 out of 85 recommendations the Select Committee came up with. The speech from the throne, Mr. Speaker, pointed out that the government will help New Brunswick move towards a low-carbon society. One of the key recommendations that we agreed on was that the Premier should chair and establish a committee of cabinet to steer that transition to a low-carbon society.
Time, member. The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, premièrement, je veux remercier le député de Fredericton Sud pour sa participation dans le comité. Je veux remercier tous les députés de tous les partis politiques qui sont représentés ici dans l'Assemblée législative pour leur participation. Je suis complètement d'accord avec le député de Fredericton Sud. C'était un exercice qui était très bien reçu par les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick. Ils ont beaucoup apprécié l'opportunité de discuter avec différents députés de cette question qui est très importante pour l'avenir de la province. Monsieur le Président, je pense que c'est aussi un rappel que ça aurait été fantastique d'avoir un processus similaire lorsque ça a venu à regarder à notre système électoral. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, although we had such success when it came to the Climate Change Steering Committee, we were unable to get the opposition to cooperate to have a same type of process that would have been very well received by New Brunswickers regarding electoral reform. So hopefully the Leader of the Opposition in the future will seek that type of cooperation with us and with all the members of the legislature.
Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. One of the key recommendations from the Select Committee's report was that the Premier establish a committee of cabinet that he chair to oversee and steer the implementation of the recommendations from the Select Committee to steer, as it says in the throne speech, New Brunswick towards a lower carbon society, recognizing, as the Premier has said repeatedly, the significance, the priority of addressing climate change in New Brunswick and across Canada. So my question is, will the Minister establish a Cabinet Committee to do so, and will he chair it?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, moi aussi, j'aimerais joindre ma voix à celle du Premier ministre pour remercier l'ensemble des membres du comité qui ont fait un travail très sérieux et également remercier l'ensemble de la population, les experts, tout le monde qui ont participé au processus. À voir le rapport, on voit tout le sérieux du travail qui a été accompli et vous comprendrez qu'avec 85 recommandations, mon staff, mon personnel est en train d'étudier l'ensemble des recommandations et je ne vais pas aujourd'hui commencer à vous dire les réponses à chacune de ces recommandations-là. Cependant, je tiens à préciser que mon gouvernement, notre gouvernement, est déterminé à faire en sorte qu'à l'avenir, nous ayons une économie et un environnement respectueux pour l'ensemble de la population. Nous savons tous à quel point un des grands défis de notre siècle sera de faire face au changement climatique et nous voulons faire partie de ceux qui vont contribuer à améliorer l'avenir de notre planète pour l'ensemble de la population, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we heard in the news recently that the Premier was in discussions with the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change around funding for New Brunswick's climate plan. The Premier will be meeting with the other First Ministers and the Prime Minister on December the 9th to finalize a pan-Canadian strategy to address climate change. My question for the Premier is, will he have a New Brunswick climate plan finalized in time for the First Minister's meeting on December the 9th?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Local Government.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Comme je le disais tout à l'heure, le gouvernement a reçu avec beaucoup d'attention le rapport qui nous a été soumis par le comité de l'Assemblée législative. Vous comprendrez que nous avons énormément de travail à faire à tous les égards. Ce qui compte, je pense, c'est que je suis très confiant. Le Premier ministre est très conscient de l'ensemble des recommandations qui ont été faites et nous allons, comme gouvernement, et le Premier ministre va certainement se rejoindre à cette réunion de l'ensemble des premiers ministres canadiens afin de faire évoluer ce dossier de façon significative. Nous savons déjà qu'il y a eu des recommandations. Nous savons déjà qu'au niveau fédéral, le Premier ministre canadien a déjà annoncé qu'il y aurait au Canada, par exemple, une tarification, devrais-je dire, sur le carbone. Nous savons donc que nous progressons ensemble. Nous avons pris acte de ce que le fédéral est en train de faire. Nous allons continuer à travailler avec nos partenaires de l'ensemble du pays afin, comme je disais tout à l'heure, d'arriver à un environnement...
Prime Minister. Member for Oromocto-Lincoln.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Teachers are worried about the government's recent surprise decision with the reintroduction of grade 1 entry point for French immersion next September that's not found in the 10-year plan. This quick timeline gives very little turnaround time for our teachers in the education system to respond adequately. Staffing, recruitment, scheduling, information to parents, teacher training, continuing the current grade 3 programs for another 3 years. These are all challenges that worry teachers. Can the Minister ensure the teachers and parents of New Brunswick that the resources will be in place, that there's an adequate implementation plan, and will the Minister, in the spirit of collaboration, provide this implementation plan to the Legislature for the entry point starting next September?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, of course there's going to be an implementation plan. Of course we're going to give the support that we believe will allow our teachers to be able to offer French immersion in grade 1. And like I said when we made this announcement, Mr. Speaker, we understand that there are some concerns with the way the system was before in grade 1, and we'll do the best we possibly can to mitigate them, Mr. Speaker. What I find very interesting is to have the opposition today say that they're surprised. Mr. Speaker, we promised this in our platform in 2014. And in fact, they promised, when they were running in 2010, Mr. Speaker, to reinstate French immersion to grade 1. So maybe why they're surprised is because we're actually doing what we promised, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Oromocto-Lincoln.
It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier is continuing to play politics with our education system. Mr. Speaker, real clearly, the Premier does not have an implementation plan for this change. He said he's going to have an implementation plan, which means there's no implementation plan. The decision's been made, and now the education system will scramble to respond when what the teachers are asking for is stability. And yes, our commitment was a review of French immersion. We did that, and yes, we received a report that said grade 1. But we chose not to implement to grade 1 because teachers said they wanted stability. We chose not to play politics. They wanted to recover from the previous entry point change made by the Liberal government. The entry point is not, the report not only says grade 1, but it says there will be additional resources. Will the government provide an implementation plan? Will the necessary resources be in place? And will you make sure that you provide that implementation plan so we can assure the teachers that you will get the work done properly?
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, c'est important pour nous de faire tout ce qu'on peut pour appuyer nos enseignantes, nos enseignants, les éducateurs et éducatrices autour de la province, Monsieur le Président. Et c'est justement ça que nous allons faire. Je ne comprends pas comment que l'opposition peut se lever aujourd'hui et dire qu'il faut faire davantage pour aider les enseignants, les enseignantes à avoir, pour avoir l'immersion précoce en français en première année. Et ils nous critiquent de dire qu'on va investir plus en éducation. Monsieur le Président, c'est important d'investir davantage en éducation et c'est aussi important d'investir de façon stratégique et c'est justement ça que nous allons faire. Nous avons donné plus de flexibilité à nos enseignants et enseignantes que jamais auparavant qu'ils ont vu avec d'autres gouvernements, Monsieur le Président. Ça, c'est parce qu'on croit en eux. On croit qu'ils sont capables de délivrer l'éducation que nos jeunes ont besoin. Il faut leur donner la flexibilité et il faut les appuyer de façon financière. Et c'est exactement ça que nous allons faire comme gouvernement et nous allons le faire de façon stratégique, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, the teachers are asking for stability like they've asked the previous government, and that's why the previous government did not make the change to grade 1 entry point. The report said in 2012 that not only with a move to grade 1, it would require additional resources. It will require staffing, recruitment, support for struggling students. The costs are enormous with a change like this, not only financially, but the cost of chaos and instability. This quick change will cause. The Premier said that we are going to have an implementation plan. That leads this House to believe that there is no implementation plan in place. This is very concerning to teachers that we don't know what the resources are going to be. We don't know if the resources are coming from existing funding, if there's going to be new resources. We know there's great challenges. This is not in the 10-year plan. It didn't come up through the consultation. Will, in the spirit of collaboration, the Premier involve the opposition, involve the stakeholders that were involved with the 10-year plan, and provide this implementation plan to assure that this will be...
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, nous l'avons mis très clair que nous allons donner plus de ressources aux enseignants et enseignantes et aux districts, Monsieur le Président, pour être capable d'instaurer l'immersion précoce en français. Nous avons dit ça depuis l'annonce, Monsieur le Président. Alors, encore une fois, je suis confus pour les questions de l'opposition à cet égard. Nous allons donner les appuis financiers qu'ils ont besoin. Nous allons mitiger beaucoup des préoccupations qu'ils avaient avec le système auparavant, Monsieur le Président. Bien sûr, notre décision a été basée sur un rapport que l'opposition, lorsqu'ils étaient au gouvernement, ont demandé pour, Monsieur le Président, qui mettait très clair qu'il fallait, pour offrir les gens l'opportunité d'apprendre une langue seconde, l'opportunité d'avoir l'immersion précoce en français en première année. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I think it's very unfortunate to see the opposition trying to use French immersion as a scapegoat. Mr. Speaker, it has been in grade 3 for over 5 years, and we have been getting the results that we've seen. This will help us offer a second language training to our kids, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, there seems to be a little confusion, so I'd ask if the government could clarify a simple question today, and that is, will carbon tax in New Brunswick be revenue neutral?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, so I think this is a great question, and I'm very pleased to have the chance to explain. We have said from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, that any pricing mechanism that we would entertain would ensure that it would have a system where we would invest that money again for energy efficiency. It's as simple as that, Mr. Speaker. Now, what term people want to use to describe what that mechanism is, I'll allow others to decide that. The debate, Mr. Speaker, has to do with whether the government would actually see an increase of revenue or whether they would keep the same amount of revenue and then lower taxes to decrease their revenue if they had a carbon tax, Mr. Speaker. We made it very clear. If there's a carbon tax, if there's a price on carbon, if there's a cap and trade, if there's any type of pricing mechanism for carbon, Mr. Speaker, all those revenues that would be raised will go back into the economy. They'll be invested in things that will help us be as energy efficient as possible. So I hope that clarifies everything for everyone here, Mr. Speaker, and I actually thank the member opposite for giving me the chance to explain.
Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, in a CBC article, it explains very clearly what it means to be revenue neutral, and it says that would mean finding a way to reduce the overall tax burden by the same amount of money, which is something very different from what the Premier is explaining to us today. And in fact, a year ago in that same article, Mr. Speaker, they quoted the Premier, and they said a few interesting things. In the Premier's own words, quote, "It's very clear that the best way to do any type of tax on carbon any type of price on carbon for a jurisdiction and have a good positive impact on the economy is making it revenue neutral." The Premier also said, quote, "If we were to look at any type of price on carbon, we'd make sure that it would be revenue neutral." Now, Mr. Speaker, it's clear to most people that revenue neutral means revenue neutral to the taxpayer, not to the government. So I'm wondering if the Premier could explain to us why he's made these comments in the past and how his tune has changed a year later.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as we would have explained throughout the discussions about this important topic, any money that will be raised or would be raised by any pricing mechanism on carbon, Mr. Speaker, will be reinvested for energy efficiency. We've said that from the beginning. We're saying that again today. What's important, Mr. Speaker, is that we work together to ensure that we do our part here in New Brunswick to combat climate change. Mr. Speaker, it is the most important and significant challenge that humanity has faced in a generation, Mr. Speaker, and we all have to work together. We have to transition to a low-carbon economy, and not only, Mr. Speaker, is it the right thing to do, there will be economic growth potential coming from it. We're going to be able to invest in the green economy, into clean tech, and many other types of investments and opportunities that will help create jobs and grow the economy, Mr. Speaker. What's important is that we all worked on this very important subject together, and I'm happy that the steering committee was able to start that dialogue with New Brunswickers.
Member from Fredericton West Hanwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I looked to yesterday's speech from the throne, and on page 14, the government makes reference to some $1 billion that are contributed to our economy through the agricultural sector, through our farmers. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, farmers understand what it's like to be revenue neutral. They understand what affects their bottom line. And in fact, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture says very clearly, a carbon tax will significantly increase the cost of doing business for farmers. And they go on to say, in addition to direct cost increases on the fuels they use, farmers will see an increase in their indirect costs for shipping and fertilizer. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the last 2 years, this government has made, as we well know, 10 tax increases, all of which also affected farmers. That includes corporate tax, property tax increases, gas tax, diesel tax, and of course, the tax on everything, the 50% HST this government has brought in. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering, at least for farmers, will we see something that makes the input of a carbon tax revenue neutral to them?
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, comme le ministre a expliqué, nous avons reçu les recommandations. Nous allons étudier judicieusement les recommandations qui ont été reçues et nous allons par la suite renforcer notre plan pour combattre les changements climatiques. Alors, Monsieur le Président, nous avons très hâte de travailler avec l'opposition et le député de Fredericton Sud pour assurer qu'on fait tout ce qu'on peut ici, Nouveau-Brunswick, pour jouer notre rôle à combattre les changements climatiques. But don't worry, Mr. Speaker, we understand what the opposition wants to do today. We get that. It's no problem. We're not surprised. They're against, of course, putting any type of price on carbon, any pricing mechanism for carbon. They're against that. They're against increasing taxes on the 1% richest of New Brunswickers, Mr. Speaker. We know that already. Don't worry. Mr. Speaker, they're against the enhancement of the CPP to allow people the chance to retire here in the province with dignity, Mr. Speaker. They're against raising the minimum wage to give those that are working hard a leg up. And, of course, they're against our free tuition program. So the opposition can stop the line of questioning funding. We're aware of all those things already.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay de Vin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to explore today the genesis, evolution, and ultimate extinction of the term revenue neutral as it applies to the Gallant government's planned carbon tax. When the former Environment Minister introduced the discussion paper in May, the opposition was understandably cynical that this was an exercise to bring in a carbon tax. Estimates of the cost to the average household run from $1,200 to $2,500 per year. With so many working-class New Brunswickers households operating from one paycheck to another, this new tax will force many beyond the brink. The Premier is on record on December 2nd, 2015, saying any carbon tax must be revenue neutral. Will the Premier explain to the House what has changed since his statement in 2015?
The Honourable the Premier.
Nothing, Mr. Speaker. We've made it very clear since the beginning that if there is a pricing mechanism on carbon, any revenue that is reached or contributed to the government's coffers will then be reinvested into energy efficiency programs, Mr. Speaker. I find it odd to have the member opposite, however, Mr. Speaker, get up and talk about everyday New Brunswickers that are working hard and that are living from paycheck to paycheck. Where was he then, Mr. Speaker? And where was the Leader of the Opposition when we raised the minimum wage to help those very people, Mr. Speaker? I'll tell you where they were. They were opposing that measure. Where were they when we were working with the Trudeau government to enhance the CPP to help New Brunswickers be able to retire with dignity, Mr. Speaker? Where were they when we were raising the taxes on the 1% richest of New Brunswickers so we can invest more in education and health care? And where were they, Mr. Speaker, when we were ensuring that we could give those who need the most support free tuition? They were opposing every single one of those progressive policies. That's where they were, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay de Vin.
Mr. Speaker, in 2015, we know where the Premier was. He was spending autumn in Paris. CBC reports the Premier said, and I quote, "If we were to look at any type of price on carbon, we would make sure that it would be revenue neutral." It's very clear that the best way to do any type of price on carbon for a jurisdiction and have a good positive impact on the economy is making it revenue neutral. Now, this past Monday, we read in the Telegraph Journal, in an interview, the Premier said the dollars from a looming price on carbon won't be returned in the form of a tax cut. He says that was never the plan. So my question would be then, what was the plan?
The Honourable the Premier.
The plan was what I've said the whole time. Mr. Speaker, the theatrics of the member opposite is not helpful, Mr. Speaker. We have made it clear from day one that if we raise any money from a pricing mechanism on carbon, it will be reinvested to make us more energy efficient in the province. It's as simple as that. Now, whatever term they want to use to describe that, Mr. Speaker, that's fine, and I'll go along with whatever term they want to use. But ultimately, the policy is what's important, Mr. Speaker. So nothing has changed. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, we have not made any decisions yet on what that could look like. But what's great is we had the opposition, we had the member from Fredericton South, all work together on a steering committee to listen to New Brunswickers and provide us with 85 recommendations on what we can do to transition to a low-carbon economy. And, Mr. Speaker, we're going to have a solid plan that plays our role to combat climate change and grow the economy.
Member for Southwest Miramichi Bay de Vin.
Mr. Speaker, this past Monday we read in the Telegraph Journal, in an interview the Premier said the dollars from a looming price on carbon won't be returned in the form of a tax cut. He says that was never the plan. Let's go back to December 2nd, 2015, while the Premier was in Paris. CBC reports Premier Gallant says any carbon tax introduced in New Brunswick will be revenue neutral. Its impact offset by the government giving up tax revenue elsewhere. I repeat, by the government giving up tax revenue elsewhere. So my question for the Premier, did the CBC get it wrong? Was the Premier misquoted?
The Honourable the Premier.
Monsieur le Président, je ne sais pas quelle entrevue qui parle, ça me fera plaisir de regarder les citations. Donc, moi, je l'ai dit directement, mais Monsieur le Président, ça a toujours été l'intention du gouvernement de s'assurer, si jamais qu'il y a un mécanisme pour ramasser de l'argent concernant la tarification sur le carbone, Monsieur le Président, que ça serait fait d'une façon, donc, ça serait réinvesti pour faire en sorte que nous avons l'efficacité lorsque ça vient à notre énergie dans la province. Monsieur le Président, nous avons mis ça très clair depuis le début. I'm happy that if the opposition has had any doubt or if there's any confusion of what that meant, I'm very happy to clarify today. But yes, that has always been our position, Mr. Speaker. Again, it's important to note there's 85 recommendations that were given by the three political parties representing the legislature to government. We're going to be acting on those recommendations soon, Mr. Speaker. And what's important is we continue to work together to transition to a low-carbon economy, making sure we're creating jobs, but also combating climate change, the most significant challenge of our generation.
Leader of the Official Opposition, final question.
Mr. Speaker, I want to return to the education again, and I guess the concerns about what the stats say. And so it says that 65% of our kids are graduating without meeting our language standards that we're proud in this province to achieve. It says that we're 80%. We're below expected levels in our math and sciences. It says we're 60% below in reading levels. So the Premier says, well, it's been 5 years. The educators say we need another 3 years in order to do a proper assessment of where it is today. The Premier says, I want stability. And yet here we go again. A platform commitment turns into a change in the whole system and turns it on its head. So I would like to ask the Premier, if the results, the stats, and the educators say we have a broken system, then how does he measure otherwise?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I really think it's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition is using French immersion as the scapegoat to the challenges facing our education systems. Mr. Speaker, again, French immersion over the last several years has been in grade 3, and yet we find ourselves today with the results that we have. So, Mr. Speaker, it's irresponsible for him to try to rev up that issue and try to make it the scapegoat to challenges facing the province, Mr. Speaker. And I have to add that if there's anything that has caused problems for our education system, Mr. Speaker, well, to quote the New Brunswick Teachers Association president, it's because of the cuts that the Leader of the Opposition made when he was the finance minister into education, Mr. Speaker. Well, we understand that we have to invest strategically in education. We understand that we have to invest more in education. And we understand that we have to allow teachers, educators, and community leaders the flexibility they need to deliver the best system possible. And that's what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker, so we can improve our educational outcomes and have a strong economy right here in the province.